Howdy, grateful you could join us today. For those that don't know me, my name is Mike, and welcome back or welcome to our small group leadership training videos. Before we get started here, I just want to say how thankful I am to all of you who lead small groups. You all set a powerful example of love and leadership in God's church, and I want you to know your care and concern for God's people has not gone unnoticed. Thank you so much for serving the way that you do. You know, today I want to talk about a topic that I believe is often not talked about amongst leaders, and that topic is gritty leadership. You know, a lot has been said in the church throughout the years about how amazing it is to be a leader in God's kingdom. You've all heard the stories of how your leadership can help your small group grow, and how your leadership can help your church grow, and how your leadership can make this world grow. And basically the thought is, the moment you step into leadership is the moment you step into making a difference. And while it's true, our leadership really can and it really does make a difference, what's also true is that leadership requires grit. The Merriam-Webster's dictionary describes grit this way. Grit is having mental toughness and having resolve and having courage. And if you've been leading for some time, you definitely have seen the need for mental toughness and for resolve and for courage, because you know how laborious and routine and mundane leading is at times. The serving, the giving, the delivering, the helping, the loving, the confronting is all hard work. And despite all the hard work you put in as a leader, sometimes your efforts will be unheard. Sometimes your efforts will be unseen. And sometimes your efforts will be unthanked and sometimes even criticized. For sure, leadership is not for the faint of heart. Aren't you glad you decided to watch this video today? Now, all jokes aside, I'm not bringing these challenges up to be negative or to complain or to discourage you or whatever, but I am bringing this up because if we're not careful, and I felt this before, if we're not careful, we can become so focused on making a difference that when the change we want to see does not come when we want to see it, we could be tempted to feel like leadership isn't for us anymore. And maybe we should just quit leading altogether. But I want to encourage you, myself included, that no matter what disappointments or hardships or inconveniences that come up in your leadership, if God has called you to lead, then you are built to lead. So stick it out. Have some grit. I'm not saying to ignore or suppress or avoid your feelings as a leader, but what I am saying is stay right where you are. Lean in. Address your feelings. But don't quit because of your feelings. Have some grit in spite of your feelings. You know, I believe the Apostle Paul describes it better than I can. Here's what he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 58. Stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. And now, I know standing firm and letting nothing move you and always giving yourself fully to the work of the Lord and basically keeping your grit no matter what happens is easier said than done. So in this video, I want to offer 4 brief tips, and these tips won't be a complete list or the end all be all, but still I want to offer 4 brief tips that have been helpful to me that I also think can be helpful to you in keeping your grit as a small group leader. So let's start with the first of the 4 tips. The first tip to keeping your grit as a small group leader is to keep on praying. In Mark chapter 1, verse 35, it says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. You see, in this passage, and really all throughout the Gospels, you see a man who didn't just teach about prayer, but a man who embodied prayer. Jesus prayed early in the morning. Jesus prayed all throughout the night. Jesus prayed with his disciples. Jesus prayed alone. Jesus prayed in the good times. Jesus prayed in the bad times. You see, Jesus made it a habit to always make room for prayer in his life. And I truly believe this is one of the many reasons Jesus stayed inspired, and Jesus stayed motivated, and Jesus stayed centered, and Jesus stayed surrendered to God's work is because he kept on praying. You know, one of the many reasons I believe we lose our grit and burn out as leaders is because we just give up on prayer. we, myself included, can slowly start to limit our communion with God because we believe our intuition and our own experiences and our own formulas are more reliable than being in the Father's presence. You know, one of the many reasons we need to keep on praying is because it's in prayer that we begin to be filled up when life and ministry gets us low. We need to keep on praying. One of the reasons we need to keep on praying is because it's in prayer where we begin to rely, like Jesus, on the Father's strength. We need to keep on praying because it's in prayer where we begin to join in the kingdom work that God is already a part of. You see, the bottom line is when we decide to immerse ourselves in prayer, we're deciding to be like Jesus, the best small group leader to ever live. So my tip to you, I told you I'm going to keep this brief. So my tip to you, if you want to keep your grit, keep on praying. The second tip I want to leave with you today is delegate. In Exodus chapter 18, we learned that Moses, in the midst of the Sinai desert, had found himself in a cycle of laboring from early morning until late at night because he was attempting to solve all the conflicts that arose in God's community. And then his father-in-law, Jethro, saw that Moses' attempt to solve all the problems was not sustainable and that he was headed for trouble. Here's what Jethro said to Moses, his father-in-law. Here's what he said to Moses. "What you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. Listen now to me and I will give you some advice. And may God be with you." And then skip down to verse 21. He said, "Select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied." And I know, if you've been around for a long time, delegation is not a new principle to you. And yet, there are some of you who are overwhelmed with the work of leading because you're attempting to do all the work by yourself. And I believe at some point you have to admit that working alone is not sustainable. Because, and you know this, when you decide to take on the group work by yourself, not only are you creating a group of takers and spectators, but you're also setting yourself up to eventually break down. Whether it's your faith that breaks down, or your health that breaks down, or your sanity that breaks down, whatever it is, if you're trying to carry the load alone, you are doomed to fail. So, for your sake, and for your group's sake, learn to offload the things that others could do so that you could focus on the things that only you could do. Like Jethro advised Moses, I advise you to learn to select some leaders to assist you. If you don't have any current leaders in your group, focus on a few in your group that could potentially be leaders. Try to persuade them to be leaders, not coerce them, because there's no reason that you should have to bear the work alone. Your grit will be depleted, your emotional health will be depleted, and your spiritual health will be depleted. So, get some help. Now, when it comes to choosing leaders, my recommendation is to start with people in your group with high character. And the reason I say start with people with high character is because your people can gain knowledge and experience. Your people can learn skills and develop their gifts. But choosing someone with high character, with godly character, is invaluable. And trust me, when I say this, when you find someone who has a godly character, it's much easier to trust them and to delegate things to them. And of course, if you find people to develop and you feel good about them, just know when you give these people responsibilities, they will absolutely make mistakes like you did when you first started. And that's okay. Expect some hiccups. and learn to stick with it and learn to embrace the development of your people. Because as Jethro said to Moses in verse 21, if you start delegating well, then you will be able to endure. And all these people will also go to their place in peace. Meaning, when you delegate, you will endure and you will be built to last and your leadership will be more sustainable and the people in your care will benefit in the long haul. So the second tip, delegate. The third tip is live in community. In Romans chapter 12, verse 4 and 5, it says, for just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ, we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. You know, in a society where it's normal for leaders to fall into individualism and become isolated, it's imperative for us as small group leaders to be reminded, as the scripture says, that we do not belong to ourselves, but we belong to a body of believers. So as a leader, I believe it will do you well, especially if you're trying to keep your grit, to live in community. And when I say live in community, what I mean is live in a community where you are truly known. Live in a community where you can do life together. Live in a community where you can practice God's will together, where you can celebrate and mourn together. Because you know this, when you read the Bible, you begin to see time and time and time again that there is so much expected from leaders. So I believe it's wise, especially if you want to keep your grit, to have a circle of tight-knit, loving, committed friendships. Friendships that mutually encourage you, friendships that refresh you, because even though you are the leader, you will be tempted to live and lead on an island. So resist that temptation by leaning into godly community. Lean into a godly community where you can have fun. Be in a community where you can get advice. Be in a community where you can talk through your concerns, where you could pray through some of those hard moments that I was discussing earlier. Live in community. You are the leader, but you also need friends. You need people that you can rely on, people that you can get refreshed by. So live in community. The final tip, practice Sabbath. Mark chapter 2, verse 27, it said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Now, before you're tempted to write me off, please hear me out. Jesus' take on the Sabbath was that the Sabbath was made for us, meaning this practice was made to benefit us and to serve us and to be life-giving for us. You see, in an age where life is so draining and life is so exhausting, the Sabbath is supposed to be an invitation to fill our souls back up with life. And boy, I'm sure we all need a refresh from time to time when we're trying to help God's people. Now, the word Sabbath comes to us from the word Shabbat. The word literally means to stop. And so the Sabbath is simply a day to stop working, to stop wanting, to stop worrying, just stop. Sabbath can also be translated to delight. So Sabbath has this dual idea of one, stopping, and then two, delighting. And you know, stopping to delight in God and stopping to delight in his beautiful creation was supposed to sound incredible to us, not like a chore or a checkoff list or a burden. You would think that we all be chopping at the bit to practice Sabbath, especially in our high-stress culture. But apparently there's something about the human condition that makes us want to hurry our way through life as fast as we possibly can, even when the hurrying is not doing any good for us, even when the hurrying is making us sick. And the hurrying is making us numb and making us uncreative and making us distracted and making us restless and making us irritable. This is important because I would argue that the hurrying is making us pay in our spiritual lives. And so when God introduced Sabbath to us, I believe he was telling us that this life of stress, this life of burnout doesn't have to be the way. It doesn't have to be your way. It doesn't have to be our way, because we can decide to practice Sabbath and and allow our souls to wake up again, you know? Now, when I say Sabbath, I'm not talking about a day off from work where we catch up on our household chores or run errands or binge watch Netflix or scroll on our phones all day. When I say Sabbath, what I mean is dedicating a day to just stop. Dedicating a day to be present to God, to be present to your family, to rest, to truly rest your soul and rest your body. I believe this is important for us as leaders. Sabbath is important because Sabbath, like I said, is literally an invitation to not just survive as a disciple or survive as a leader, but this is an invitation to actually thrive as a disciple, to actually thrive as a leader. So, I said a lot here, but as I come for a close, if you want to be a leader that has grit, no matter what season you're in, I recommend that you keep on praying and that you delegate and that you live in community and that you practice Sabbath. Again, I respect you all so much for deciding to lead, and I hope this video has been helpful to you and your leadership journey. Have a wonderful day.